Ever since Donald Trump has stepped into power, he has been making controversial foreign policies. And one of the foreign policies that has been causing political turmoil, especially in Africa, is the 90-day freeze of the US aid funding. What does this mean? What was the USA doing? According to my findings, in 2023, US aid to the Southern African or the Sub-Saharan African countries funded billion US dollars in healthcare, security, and delivering food assistance. But now, the United States Presidential Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, known as PEPFAR funding, has been providing ARVs for Zimbabweans. Back in the day, we used to know that if an individual has AIDS, that guarantees a death sentence. But because of this PEPFAR funding, living with people with HIV was now normal. We were living normally with people with HIV. But now, because our countries has been highly dependent on this PEPFAR funding, now that it has been frozen by Donald Trump, Mawanatang.
No matter how busy her day gets, Muchaneta Savanu can't forget to take her medication. The 48-year-old says she gets her antiretroviral treatment for free from aid agencies. She was shocked to hear that the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, has abruptly suspended its operations and funding for at least 90 days. Some life-saving HIV treatment is continuing, but no one knows how long that will last.
We are going to die. That's what it means. They must have pity on us. We need that money so we can keep getting our medication.
USAID distributes billions in aid to non-governmental organizations, aid groups and non-profits around the world. The US gave sub-Saharan Africa more than $6.5 billion in humanitarian assistance last year.
The United States' pause on foreign aid has hurt the most vulnerable and marginalized communities in Africa. Before I take much of your time, let's hear what Al Jazeera has to say.
From fighting drug trafficking and disease to providing education and funding human rights organizations, these were all roles fulfilled by the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, now shut by the Trump administration. And while thousands of projects around the world are brought to a halt, some say the discontinued aid offers an opportunity. I'm Annalise Borges, and this is The Stream.
$9 million in food is rotting on the docks right now because of what Trump did to suspend U.S. aid.
The Ugandan government has urged health workers affected by the pause of U.S. aid funding to Uganda to continue performing their duties voluntarily.
So this is my last bottle of ale. And apparently, so there's no stock in some places.
The consequences of halting USAID have been felt from Myanmar to Ukraine, Sudan to Haiti. These are refugees in Kenya's Kakuma camp protesting food and water shortages following the decision by the Trump administration to put the USAID programs there on hold.
African leaders should have assumed responsibility of their social and economic issues in the first place. Why? Because high dependency on foreign aid can only go so far. Looking at the foreign policies being made by Donald Trump now, it seems like we are all screwed. Okay, let's look at US aid by definition. US aid means United States Agency for International Development, and it is an independent agency of the United States government responsible for administering civilian aid, development assistance, focusing on economic growth, health, development of the environment, and democratic governance. From my perspective, this is United States of America exerting its influence all over the world. And if they say this, if they say jump, You don't ask why, you ask how high. There are speculations all over the internet that the United States of America has been funding war in Africa through US aid. By this, we now see that this only goes beyond international development. There's influence.
Issue of the US aid. Yes. So the US aid allegedly and quite rightly has been accused of funding terrorism and of misusing these funds to manipulate policies in developing countries, particularly Africa. It's the same instance with Nigeria here. Of course, the Boko Haram, there's so many advanced weapons. Why? It's because some of their funding came from the US aid.
So it has just been confirmed today in the US Congress that US aid has been directly funding terrorist organizations across the world, like Boko Haram in Nigeria. As in, the US government was directly sending tens of millions of dollars to destabilize the Nigerian state and lead to the death of tens of thousands of Nigerian people for at least a decade now.
America needs Nigeria to have conflict so that they can influence their control. It's pretty simple. It's business. Politics is business. The government runs on a business. Resources are businesses.
Put you in defensive positions, etc. But we were never allowed to execute the entire operation. So in 1 month, we took back terrain larger than Belgium from Boko Haram. We were not allowed to finish because it came at a time when governments were in the process of changing. I think President Jonathan's government possibly saw the entire Boko Haram contract, if we call it that, almost as a last gasp in order to regain popularity. The incoming president, President Buhari, was heavily supported by a foreign government, and one of the first missions was to terminate our contract.
Could you name that foreign government?
Yes, we were told it was the United States, and they had actually funded President Buhari's campaign. The campaign manager for President Buhari came from the US, and we can look at all the conflicts in Africa where foreign forces have come in, they've prolonged those conflicts, they haven't ended those conflicts. And the amount of money and manpower and equipment thrown at those conflicts says to me that something is wrong if no end result is achieved.
So let's look at what this funding freeze mean for my fellow brothers and sisters in Africa from a general perspective. Number one, the US aid fund freeze has major implications for Africa as the organization is one of the largest providers of aid on the continent. And many African nations depend on US aid to fund programs tackling diseases like HIV and AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, and maternal health. This freeze disrupts critical services, leaving vulnerable populations at greater risk of illness and death. The second one is food security. US aid supports agricultural development and emergency food assistance without this aid. Now that these Americans have made their move, what are we supposed to do as Africans? African leaders must innovate the youths to develop their own medical systems, medications from a grassroots level, from our own resources. Because we do have the resources, but we don't have the know-how. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking your time to watch this video. Please don't forget to subscribe. And for all the AU students, don't forget to vote.